oil and to speak on behalf of oil and gas very briefly, the technology for extraction has improved greatly over the past couple decades, largely because of pressure from the environmental community.
Yes.
So I would not be as worried about a direct impact on the Utah wilderness, although that is a concern. I'm not saying that there's none.
Right.
But I think what really drove Tim DeChristopher was the global impact of releasing this much more carbon into our atmosphere, something that does have a direct impact on the ocean, regardless of where it's released. It's in the global atmosphere.
Yeah, you're right. That's true, because it could have been a small operation, it could have been a large operation. We don't know, but yeah, you're right. It's just another mechanism that's going. That just releases more carbon. It's almost like you're asking. It's almost like we're asking the question. When is enough enough? When does drilling stop? When do we have enough oil? They always say we're running out of oil, and that's the cause of raising prices and things like that. But we really know that's probably not the case.
And what are we willing to sacrifice for it?
Exactly.
Are we willing to sacrifice coastal communities around the Gulf that have been fishing and shrimping and crabbing for generations, that's part of American heritage? Are we willing to turn the Gulf of Mexico into a giant cesspool toilet?
Yeah, exactly.
So that we can drive more cars?
Yeah.
It's the trade-offs is what you have to look at.
Exactly. And this is and this is where advocacy really comes into effect. I guess the one question I want to ask you, and I have my answers. Do you agree with what he did? Like, if you were in his place, and would you do the same thing?
Okay,
that's what I want to know.
I do not condone illegal actions as a first line of attack.
Okay.
I don't know the full backstory of his relationship to the Utah wilderness and what he had tried before.
Okay.
Now, although I don't condone illegal activities as a first line, I do believe that there comes a time when nothing else is working, that civil disobedience is something that is absolutely essential to get the message across to governments and corporations that this is not okay with the people. Civil disobedience has a long history and is something that that is a valuable part of our society and in making the world around us a better place.
Right. Now, how would you because people can take civil disobedience to many different levels. Like, for instance, one example is this just passed, I think it was in May, in the House of Commons in Canada, in our government, a page, a person working with I don't know if it was the opposition or whoever, it was right after our elections. She got up and held a sign. Like, now it's kind of like your House of Commons where everything's filmed and it's all on TV. She got up quietly, held a sign into the camera saying, "Stop Harper. Harper needs to be stopped." Something like that. And of course she got fired, and she was on TV, she was on CBC, and she said the same thing. She said, it's gotten to a point where civil disobedience was necessary. Now, she didn't hit anybody, she didn't threaten anybody, she didn't threaten to bomb anything or anything like that. She just got up from her seat as a page, got up while I think the speaker was talking to the House, and just held this sign and got escorted, didn't say a word, and just got escorted. But I'll tell you, it got a lot of media coverage, and I know she said to the media she got a lot of job offers from there, and I think it was David Suzuki called her, and I'm not sure, but she got offers from many different organizations saying, we kind of like what you did, we like the way you spoke on TV, and would you work with us? So, that to me, and protesting is civil disobedience. So I guess it really depends on how people interpret what civil disobedience is. How far does civil disobedience go? In a protest, how far does it go? Look at G20 is supposed to be civil disobedience protests, and
those are obviously not when it escalates to violence and you begin throwing things that hit other people, no matter what those things are. that is no longer civil disobedience.
Right. You're right. I agree. And so I guess civil disobedience is just more of what Tim did, in a way.
Yeah, maybe
a little to the extreme.
I definitely see your point that what he did was a little bit more elaborate than say Gandhi laying in the road.
Right.
It took a little bit more planning and a little bit a little bit more thought, and it took outright deception for him to pull it off. But really the impact and his intended impact was no different than Gandhi or Rosa Parks.
Yeah.
He wanted the government and the people to take notice that what was going on there was not right. And he did it in a way that harmed nobody.
Exactly. Now, I like the way he did. I'll have to agree. I like the way he did. Yes, he did break the law. And I bet you the reason why they made such a big stink is because there was so much money involved. Nothing got transacted, but there was so much money involved. I bet you that's what caught sort of the court's eye and saying, you know what, if you did lay in the road, you may have been arrested for the day, maybe put in a night in jail, and then sent home, maybe fined, things like that. But I think once you really impact sort of the monetary value of a piece of land or anything like that, and you disrupt it, you disrupt money transfer. As silly as it may sound, especially when you get into millions of dollars, I bet you that's sort of what caught the eye and said, no, we're not going to start this. We're going to make you an example and say you're not going to start bidding on things that you can't afford, so to speak.
Well, I think what they've done by doing that is they have in fact started this.
Yeah.
And I think that you're going to be seeing more and more and more of this type of escalation of civil disobedience, where people are realizing that the system is no longer working for them. It's working for corporations.
Right.
And I have no voice. My votes don't matter. Everything that I want and what I elect my officials to do, they go to Washington and they don't do it. And we end up with more Wall Street mess and more pollution and more oil companies drilling in the Gulf of Mexico, and everything that I don't want happens. So why even bother? And so I think because of those extremes and the government's one-sided ear listening to the corporations and not to the people, I think you're going to see more and more Tim DeChristophers. Yeah. And if the judicial system acts in the way that they have with Tim DeChristopher by being so heavy-handed, it's going to escalate to things that we do not want in our society.
Yeah, no, I agree. Now, but he did open the door to something that's interesting. What if people got together and had the money to lease these lands?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, he
well,
didn't
then that
have
wouldn't have been illegal. He wouldn't have been charged.
No, exactly. But I mean, he may pave the way to something new. I mean, if you think about it, you look at the Gulf of Mexico, you look at the east coast of Canada, all that land, and even some in the Arctic, all that land is leased. Or, sorry, all that water is leased. Those parcels of water are leased to oil companies for for X amount of dollars. Most likely in the millions, perhaps even in the billions of dollars. But what if groups got together and started, pooled money together? Foundations, philanthropists.
Well, you brought up the Nature Conservancy earlier. And they already have begun moving away from strictly buying land to looking at the lease rights.
Yeah,
and they've done this both. Okay. They've both done this both in the case of forest concessions in the tropics for logging, as well as for fishing access rights. They've bought up fishing access rights in order to reduce fishing impact, but I think that in the case of oil and gas, no matter if all the conservation and environmental groups in the world came together and everybody who supported them, I think it's just cost prohibitive. The value is too high for us to raise that kind of money to compete against big oil.
Yeah, even Bill Gates
on a dollar-to-dollar basis.
Yeah, even Bill Gates would have a problem, I think, going up against them with the dollar value. So to speak. But I mean, it is interesting to say, hey, look, people are coming. Like, if you think about $1.7 million in today's world is not that much.
Right.
That's probably pocket change for an oil and gas company, but that could be raised or already been had by a number of organizations, or even some big philanthropist.
I personally think that in this particular situation, a better route would have been, and there may have been this route also being taken, and we just don't hear about it because it doesn't make the news. But for a group such as NRDC, which specializes in environmental law, to go in and to sue the federal government for opening those wilderness lands because it was a violation.
Yeah,
that would have been probably the best road to take.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but you know, that's a yesterday decision.
Yeah, no, well, absolutely. I mean, but he did catch the eye of people. He definitely caught my eye. And I've been chatting it to, I've been telling a bunch of friends, and I've been posting it on my social network and everything like that, because what he did was important. He got the short end of the stick in terms of the punishment. There's no doubt about that. I mean, I know guys at Enron who did way worse, got way less, sentences. But he kind of opened the road. Who knows? Maybe NRDC wouldn't have gotten in, or those environmental organizations or environmental lawyer organizations wouldn't have gotten involved if he hadn't done anything. But you kind of opened up another sort of form of advocacy that's really taken precedence in the last 5 to 10 years is environmental law. It's huge now. A lot of people are going into it. They feel good about it. They're kind of getting out of corporate law and they're going into environmental law. Sure, it may not be as much money as corporate law, but I think it's a lot more rewarding, in my opinion, anyway.
A lot of people feel that way.
Yeah, but it's taking it to the courts. It's taking it to those companies, because you're getting somebody with sort of that corporate education or that corporate thinking, and becoming, sort of almost switching sides, or going on the environment side, and battling out in the courts where everything needs to be won is in the courts. I mean, one example is up in Alaska a few years ago on the North Slope when Shell wanted to drill. Now I think it was a conglomerate of organizations that got together, and I think NRDC was one of the lead ones that did the environmental lawyer aspect. And they got together and they actually stopped that drilling for an entire summer. And other organizations were out there protesting and things like that, but they actually stopped, probably an over $1 billion operation in the courts. They had an injunction that Shell could not drill during the 2 or 3 months that, they had like the environmental window where it was actually, not the water wasn't iced over. They couldn't drill because of what was happening in the courts. Now that's a form of advocacy that's been really effective, and in other cases as well, where they've actually, the environmental organizations and individuals have actually stopped things from being destroyed, stopped land from being destroyed or developed upon. Looking just the Tim DeChristopher example, stopped land being released by the president. Saying that no, you cannot release this. It's not, it's not your jurisdiction, or I don't know what the reason was. I think it was because it was a federal land.
Right.
You can't do that. What do you think of this type of advocacy?
Of
like
of
the lawyer, like
policy?
I guess using lawyers to go in and battle in court, like taking it to the law and take it to the regulations. I mean, the Alaska example was the Shell did the environmental assessments. And the conglomerates went to the court and said that the law for and the regulation for environmental assessments is not correct. There's not enough being done. So they actually challenged the law. The Shell did their part. They did what they had to do according to the regulation. But it's still it wasn't good enough for the environmentalists, and they said no, we need better, and they actually got an injunction. So what do you think? What do you think about environmental law, and that is that really a
environmental law and policy is one of the core tenets of the conservation movement.